My wife betrayed me. When my father at an early age split up with my mother, she married the football coach, and one day I saw him with my wife together in bed. You know, every so often life hits you with a surprise so intense, it takes your breath away. I'm sitting here trying to piece it all together, feeling like my entire world has been flipped upside down. Let me take you back to where it all began. My name's David, and I'm 28 years old. I met my wife, Sarah, way back in the 8th grade. We were those high school sweethearts that everyone thought would last forever. And until recently, I thought we were one of the lucky ones who actually made it. Sarah and I went through everything together: high school, college, the ups and downs of growing up. We got married right after graduation at 24. 4 years married, and we have a beautiful 3-year-old daughter, Lily. From the outside looking in, we had it all: the house, the family, the life we dreamed of. But sometimes the biggest cracks are hidden just beneath the surface. My parents divorced when I was 8. It was tough, but Mom did her best to raise me right. When I was 17, she married John, a former football player turned coach. John was, well, he was different. He wasn't a bad guy, just not someone I ever got too close to. He's 65 now, still coaching, still married to my mom, and that's where things get twisted. My job in software sales keeps me busy. The hours are unpredictable, which means I sometimes come home when no one expects me. It was one of those days, just a typical Thursday. I finished early and thought I'd surprise Sarah. I pulled up to our house and saw John's car parked a couple of blocks away. Odd, I thought, but didn't dwell on it. Maybe he was helping out with something around the house. He's handy like that. I went around the back and used the side door, like I always do when I don't want to wake Lily from her nap. As soon as I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. I walked towards our bedroom, and that's when I heard it, the unmistakable sounds of betrayal. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt like I was going to be sick. I pushed the door open, and there they were, Sarah and John. The world stopped spinning for a second. I couldn't believe my eyes. It felt like a nightmare, one of those where you want to wake up but can't. Sarah's face turned pale when she saw me, and John, well, he just looked ashamed. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. I just turned around and walked out, my head spinning, my heart shattered. When I finally gathered myself, I went back in. Sarah was sitting on the edge of the bed, trying to cover herself with a sheet. John had put his clothes on and was standing there, looking at the floor. The first words out of Sarah's mouth were, "I needed something different." That was it. No apology, no remorse, just that. I needed something different. Those words are burned into my brain. How could they do this to me, to my mom, to Lily? I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and deep, deep sadness. The woman I loved, the mother of my child, had been cheating on me with my stepfather. It was like a bad soap opera, only it was my life. Sarah tried to explain herself, but every word out of her mouth just made it worse. She didn't even know when it started. She thought maybe it had been going on for 6 years. 6 years. That meant it started before we even got married. I felt like a fool, like my whole life had been a lie. "Sarah, what do you mean something different?" I snapped, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. "How could you do this to me, to us?" Sarah looked down at the floor, her eyes welling up with tears. "David, I don't know what to say. I never meant to hurt you. I felt trapped. Our lives were so predictable and I felt like I was losing myself. John was there and it just happened." "Just happened?" I yelled, my anger boiling over. "For 6 years? That doesn't just happen. You had a choice, Sarah. Every single time you were with him, you chose him over me, over our family." John cleared his throat, finally looking up from the floor. "David, I never wanted this to come out this way. I know I've done something terrible, and I'm deeply sorry. I know it doesn't make up for anything, but I care about you, son. I really do." I could hardly believe my ears. "Care about me? You betrayed me in the worst possible way. You're supposed to be my stepfather, my family, and you destroyed everything." John stepped closer, his face twisted with guilt. "I know, David, I know, and I'll regret this for the rest of my life. But you need to understand, it wasn't just about the physical part. Sarah and I connected on a deeper level. We were both feeling lost, and we found solace in each other." "Solace?" I scoffed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You found solace in ruining 2 families, in tearing apart everything we built." Sarah started to sob, her shoulders shaking. "David, please, I'm so sorry. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to try to make things right for Lily's sake, if nothing else. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle over me. No, Sarah, this is beyond fixing. You've shattered everything I believed in. I can't trust you anymore, and I can't live like this. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Sarah's sobs grew louder, but I didn't waver. I turned to John, my anger boiling over. And you, I spat, stepping toward him. You deserve worse. Without another thought, I drew back my fist and swung with all the anger and pain I felt. My fist connected with his jaw in a solid, satisfying punch, the kind of punch I'd learned in those boxing classes I took a few years back. John staggered back, clutching his face, his eyes wide with shock. You son of a bitch, I growled. Get out of my house and don't you ever come near me or my family again. John, still reeling from the punch, nodded and stumbled out of the room, his face already starting to bruise. Sarah was still crying, but I couldn't deal with her right now. I needed space. I needed to think. I walked aimlessly for what felt like hours, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions crashing over me. The betrayal, the anger, the sadness, it was all too much to handle. I ended up at a small park not far from our house, sitting on a bench and staring blankly at the playground where Lily and I had spent countless afternoons. As I sat there, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a flurry of missed calls and texts from Sarah. I didn't have the energy to read them. I knew what they would say: apologies, pleas for forgiveness, promises to change. But it was too late for that. The damage was done. Eventually, I mustered the strength to stand up and head back home. Not because I wanted to see Sarah, but because I needed to make arrangements for Lily. She was the only innocent one in all of this, and she deserved stability. As I approached the house, I took a deep breath and steeled myself for what was to come. When I walked through the front door, the house was eerily quiet. Sarah was sitting on the couch, her face pale and tear-streaked. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. Please, let's talk. We can work this out." I shook my head, my resolve firm. "Sarah, there's nothing to talk about. I've made up my mind. I'm filing for divorce. We need to figure out a plan for Lily, but there's no way we can stay together after what you did." She broke down into sobs again, but I couldn't afford to let her tears sway me. I had to be strong for Lily's sake. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice softer. "She's with my mom," Sarah replied, sniffling. "I didn't want her to see us like this." I nodded, relieved that Lily was spared from witnessing the chaos. "I'm going to pick her up. We need to start making arrangements for custody and everything else." Sarah wiped her eyes, looking utterly defeated. "Okay, but David, please, can we at least try counseling for Lily's sake?" "Never," I said firmly, and went to my mom's house. I found myself sitting with my mom, trying to find the right words to tell her what had happened. She looked at me, concern etched on her face. "David, what's wrong? You look like you've been through hell." I took a deep breath, feeling a lump in my throat. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you. It's about John and Sarah." Her eyes widened in shock, and I could see the fear creeping in. "What is it, David? What's going on?" I told her everything: the affair, the betrayal, my decision to divorce Sarah. She listened in stunned silence, her face growing paler with every word. When I finished, she looked like she'd been punched in the gut. "Oh my God, David, I can't believe this." "John, how could he?" she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. I reached out and took her hand, trying to offer some comfort. "I don't know, Mom, but we can't change what happened. We just have to move forward." She nodded, wiping away her tears. "You're right. We'll get through this. And David, I'm so sorry you had to go through this. You don't deserve any of it." The next few months were a blur of paperwork, court dates, and sleepless nights. Sarah and I had initially agreed on the basics of the divorce and custody arrangement, but it quickly became clear that the reality was going to be far messier than we had anticipated. Sarah had moved out and found an apartment nearby. She was still trying to convince me that we could work things out, but every time she brought it up, it only deepened my resolve to go through with the divorce. She wasn't just fighting to keep our marriage, she was fighting to keep everything the same, as if her betrayal could be erased with enough apologies and tears. One evening I received a call from my lawyer, Tom. He was a no-nonsense guy with years of experience in family law. "David, we need to talk." Sarah's hired a lawyer, and they're pushing back hard on the custody arrangement. She doesn't want to give you primary custody of Lily. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. What do you mean, pushing back? We agreed that Lily would stay with me most of the time. Tom sighed. She's arguing that it's in Lily's best interest to have equal time with both parents. They're also claiming that your work schedule makes it difficult for you to be a full-time parent. That's BS, I snapped, anger flaring. I've been managing just fine. Lily's well taken care of and she needs stability right now, not bouncing back and forth. I know, David, but this isn't going to be easy. We need to prepare for a fight, Tom said. I suggest we gather as much evidence as possible to support your case documentation, character references, anything that shows you're the better option for primary custody. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could: photos, receipts, letters from Lily's daycare, testimonials from friends and neighbors. I even talked to my boss, who agreed to write a letter explaining how my work schedule was flexible enough to accommodate my parenting responsibilities. Despite my efforts, the court proceedings were grueling. Sarah's lawyer was aggressive, painting a picture of a mother desperate to be with her child and a father who was too busy with work to provide the necessary care. Sarah sat in the courtroom, tears streaming down her face, playing the part of the heartbroken mother perfectly. It was infuriating. Tom fought back just as hard, presenting our evidence and highlighting Sarah's betrayal and its impact on our family. He argued that Lily needed stability and that I was the better option for providing it, but it was clear that the judge was torn, trying to balance the interests of both parents. The day of the final hearing came, and I was a bundle of nerves. I sat in the courtroom, clutching a photo of Lily, praying that the judge would see reason and grant me primary custody. When the judge finally announced the decision, my heart sank. After careful consideration of all the evidence presented, it is the court's decision that Lily Anderson will remain in the primary custody of her mother, Sarah Anderson. The father, David Anderson, will have visitation rights every other weekend. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I glanced over at Sarah, who was still crying, but there was a glint of triumph in her eyes that she couldn't quite hide. John was sitting a few rows back, his expression unreadable. I felt a surge of rage so intense that I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. As I walked out of the courtroom, my mind was a whirlwind of anger and despair. I had fought so hard, and it had all been for nothing. Lily, my little girl, would be living with the woman who had betrayed me and with the man who had helped her do it. The injustice of it all burned like acid in my veins. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, the anger gave way to something darker. I knew I couldn't let them get away with what they'd done. They had torn my life apart, and now they had my daughter. I needed to make them pay. I needed to take revenge. The first step was to gather information. I started by keeping a close eye on Sarah and John. I knew their routines, their habits. I knew when Sarah was home alone and when John would visit. I began to document everything, building a case that I could use to take them down. I knew I had to be careful. One wrong move, and they would see it coming. One night, I followed John after one of his visits to Sarah's place. He drove to a bar on the outskirts of town. I watched as he parked and went inside. I waited a few minutes before following him in. The bar was dimly lit, and the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke hung heavy in the air. John was sitting at the bar, nursing a drink. I approached him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hey, John," I said, sliding onto the stool next to him. He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes before he composed himself. "David, what are you doing here?" I forced a smile. "Just thought we should have a chat." He frowned, suspicion clouding his expression. "About what? About Sarah, about Lily, about the mess you've made of my life?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. John shifted uncomfortably on his stool. "Look, David, I know you're angry, but this isn't the place." I cut him off. "You're right, it's not the place. But you know what? I don't care anymore. You ruined my life, John, you and Sarah, and now I'm going to make sure you pay for it." Before he could react, I grabbed him by the collar and pulled him close. "If you think for 1 second that I'm going to let you and Sarah get away with this, you're dead wrong. You took everything from me, and now I'm going to take everything from you." John's eyes widened in fear. "David, calm down. Let's talk about this." I let go of him, shoving him back onto the stool. "There's nothing to talk about. You and Sarah made your choices, and now you'll face the consequences." I left the bar, my mind racing with plans for revenge. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously crafted my strategy. I started with Sarah. Next, I turned my attention to John. His business was still standing, but I knew how to chip away at its foundation. I began by spreading rumors about his work, leaving fake negative reviews online, and even sabotaging some of his jobs under the cover of night. Clients began to lose trust in him, and soon his business started to suffer. I spent time researching and acquiring several non-venomous snakes. They were harmless, but looked terrifying. I knew this would push Sarah to her breaking point. I made sure Lily was at my mom's house for a sleepover, ensuring she would be safe and away from the chaos I was about to unleash. Late one night, I drove to Sarah's house, the bag of snakes writhing in the passenger seat. My heart pounded as I approached her front door. I picked the lock quietly and slipped inside, releasing the snakes into various rooms. I could almost imagine the terror on her face when she discovered them. The next morning, I got a call from Sarah. She was hysterical, her voice trembling with fear. "David, there are snakes in my house. How could you do this?" I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, but kept my voice calm. "I told you, Sarah. You'll face the consequences." Later that day, I received another call, this time from a mutual friend. Sarah had been rushed to the hospital after suffering a severe panic attack. She had fainted and hit her head, resulting in a minor concussion. As I hung up the phone, a wave of mixed emotions washed over me. The revenge had gone further than I intended, but a part of me felt vindicated. Days passed, and the incident with the snakes spread through our community. People talked, and Sarah's reputation took a hit. She was seen as unstable, and whispers about her personal life grew louder. The fear and humiliation she endured were just the beginning of my plan. Next, I turned my attention to John. As I plotted my next move, I couldn't help but recall how my mom had reacted when I first told her about the affair. She had been devastated, of course, but she hadn't hesitated to take action. Without a word to anyone else, she had kicked John out of the house and thrown all his stuff out onto the street. It was a decisive move that had left John scrambling for a place to stay and dealing with the fallout of his actions. Now it was my turn. John's business was still standing, but not for long. I started by spreading rumors about his work, leaving fake negative reviews online, and even sabotaging some of his jobs under the cover of night. Clients began to lose trust in him, and soon his business started to suffer. John's frustration grew, and I could see the stress wearing him down. I continued my campaign, ensuring he never had a moment's peace. Anonymous letters detailing his affair with Sarah found their way to his mailbox, reminding him that he was never truly safe from the consequences of his actions. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to hit him harder. I needed to destroy his livelihood completely. I hired a private investigator to dig into John's past. It didn't take long to uncover some old skeletons' unpaid debts, questionable business deals, and a few run-ins with the law that he'd managed to keep quiet. I compiled all the information into a dossier and sent it anonymously to his current clients and partners, making sure they knew exactly who they were dealing with. The fallout was immediate. Contracts were canceled, and business partners severed ties. John's business, once thriving, was now crumbling. The stress took its toll on him, and he began to look worn and haggard. But I still wasn't satisfied. I wanted John to feel the same sense of paranoia and fear that Sarah had experienced with the snakes. I began sending him anonymous letters detailing every move he made, every secret he thought he could keep hidden. I made sure he knew I was always watching. The fear and paranoia began to eat away at him, driving a wedge between him and Sarah as they turned on each other, each suspecting the other of leaking their secrets. Finally, I planned the ultimate humiliation. I knew John was trying to salvage his business by bidding on a major contract. I anonymously sent a package to the company he was trying to win over, filled with evidence of his past and current indiscretions, photos, emails, legal documents, everything laid out clearly. When John arrived for his presentation, the company executives were already reviewing the package. They refused to even hear his pitch, showing him the door instead. He left, humiliated and defeated, his last hope for saving his business gone. John's life was in shambles. He was without a home, without a business, and with a tarnished reputation that would be nearly impossible to recover from. I had taken everything from him, just as he had taken everything from me. Despite the satisfaction of my revenge, The emptiness inside me remained. The betrayal had cut deep, and while I had inflicted pain on Sarah and John, it hadn't healed my own wounds. The court's decision still weighed heavily on me. Lily deserved better, and I needed to find a way to provide that for her. I couldn't trust anyone else after what had happened. Relationships seemed like a trap, a way to get hurt again. So I made a decision about my personal life and swore off serious relationships. I told myself that I would never let anyone get close enough to betray me again. Instead, I turned to one-night stands. They were uncomplicated and free of emotional baggage. They gave me a way to feel something, even if it was just physical, without the risk of getting hurt. It became a routine. I'd meet someone, spend the night, and then walk away without a second thought. At first, it was a way to numb the pain. I would go out, find a girl, and lose myself in the moment. No strings attached, no commitments, just a brief escape from the loneliness and anger that had become my constant companions. Each encounter was different, but they all followed the same pattern. I'd charm them with my story, leaving out the darker details, and let them think they were helping a broken man. They'd feel special for a night, and I'd get what I needed without any of the emotional complications. There was Jenna, the bartender at a local dive. She had a kind heart and a sympathetic ear. One night, after a few too many drinks, I found myself spilling a sanitized version of my story to her. She listened without judgment, offering comfort and understanding. We ended up back at her place, and for a few hours, I felt a warmth I hadn't known in a long time. But by morning, I was gone, leaving her a note thanking her for the night. Then there was Megan, the fitness instructor with a wild streak. I met her at the gym, where I was trying to channel my anger into something productive. She was energetic, confident, and fiercely independent. Our night together was intense and passionate, a whirlwind of physical release that left us both breathless. She was perfect for what I needed, someone who demanded nothing but the moment. Lisa was different. She was a single mom, someone who understood pain and betrayal in a way few others could. We met at a park, both of us watching our kids play. Our conversation started casually, but there was an unspoken connection, a shared understanding of hurt and resilience. That night, we found solace in each other's arms. But even with her, I couldn't let my guard down completely. I left before dawn, not wanting to face the morning after. There was also Emily, a traveling consultant who was only in town for a week. We met at a business mixer, both of us looking for a distraction. She was intelligent, witty, and fiercely ambitious. Our time together was brief but exhilarating. She made it clear she wasn't looking for anything serious, which suited me just fine. We parted ways with a mutual understanding, no strings attached, no promises made. And then there was Rachel, an artist with a free spirit and a bohemian lifestyle. I met her at a gallery opening, drawn to her creativity and zest for life. We spent a night talking about art, life, and everything in between. The physical connection was almost secondary to the intellectual and emotional release I felt. She was a breath of fresh air, but I knew it couldn't last. I left her with a kiss on the cheek and a whispered thank you. Each encounter was a band-aid on a deeper wound, a way to momentarily forget the betrayal that had shattered my trust. These women were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair, but I never allowed myself to get too close. The walls I had built around my heart were too high, too thick to let anyone in. Despite these fleeting connections, the emptiness inside me remained. Late at night, when the house was quiet and the weight of the day settled in, the loneliness would creep back in. I would think about the women I had been with, wondering if I would ever find someone I could truly trust again. So I kept my heart guarded, relying on these brief encounters to keep the loneliness at bay. I told myself it was enough, that I could live like this indefinitely. But deep down, I knew it was a lie. The one-night stands were a temporary fix, a way to cope with the pain, but they weren't a solution. One evening, I was sitting in my living room. I had poured myself a drink and settled into my favorite chair, the one that overlooked the window where I could see the streetlights flicker on. The house was silent, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions I usually tried to keep at bay. I picked up my phone, intending to do a quick check of emails and messages before turning in for the night. As I scrolled through my notifications, a familiar name popped up on my Facebook feed. It was a mutual friend from high school, one of those people I barely kept in touch with, but hadn't unfriended either. The post was tagged with several names, including Sarah's. Curiosity piqued, I tapped on the notification. The photo that loaded was of a large, elegant gathering. In the center of the image was Sarah, looking radiant in a white dress, her hand gently resting on her noticeably swollen belly. Next to her was a man I didn't recognize, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. The caption read, "So happy for Sarah and Michael. Can't wait to celebrate their wedding and the new addition to their family." My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. Sarah was getting married again, and she was pregnant. It felt like a punch to the gut. The air sucked out of my lungs as I struggled to make sense of it. The woman who had shattered my life, who had torn my world apart, had already moved on and found happiness. She was starting a new family. A wave of anger surged through me, quickly followed by a crushing sense of betrayal. How could she move on so quickly? How could she find happiness after everything she had done? The betrayal stung just as sharply as it had the first time. It was a brutal reminder that she had never been trustworthy, and it reinforced my belief that women couldn't be trusted. I couldn't shake the image of her smiling face from my mind. It haunted me, mocking my pain and my efforts to rebuild my life. The rage I felt was consuming, but underneath it was a profound sadness. The realization that she was starting a new family while mine was irrevocably broken was almost too much to bear. As I sat there, staring at the photo, memories of our life together flooded back, the good times, the laughter, the moments when I believed we were unbreakable, and then the darker times, the betrayal, the lies, the feeling of my heart being ripped out of my chest when I discovered her with John. It all came rushing back, as raw and painful as the day it happened. I had spent so much time trying to move on, trying to piece my life back together. I had poured everything into being the best father I could be for Lily, into creating a stable and loving environment for her. But seeing Sarah so happy, so free from the consequences of her actions, it felt like all my efforts were for nothing. It was as if the universe was telling me that no matter how hard I tried, I would always be the one left picking up the pieces. I thought about the women I had been with since the divorce, the one-night stands that had become my way of coping. Each encounter was a fleeting moment of connection, a way to feel something without having to invest emotionally. But none of them had been able to fill the void left by Sarah's betrayal. I had kept my heart guarded, convinced that it was better to never let anyone get close enough to hurt me again. Each woman had served a purpose, but none had been able to penetrate the walls I had built around my heart. Now, as I looked at the photo of Sarah and her new fiancé Michael, I felt those walls growing even higher, even thicker. This was proof that I had been right all along. Women couldn't be trusted. They would smile in your face, make you believe you were the center of their world, and then tear your heart out without a second thought. The pain of Sarah's betrayal was compounded by the knowledge that she was starting a new family. She was building a future with someone else, while I was left to navigate the wreckage of our past. It felt like a cruel twist of fate, a reminder that life could be profoundly unfair. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I knew I couldn't let this consume me. I had to stay strong for Lily. She needed me to be her rock, her constant in a world that had been turned upside down. But the anger and hurt were hard to push away. The following days were a blur. I went through the motions, taking care of Lily, going to work, trying to keep my mind occupied. But every spare moment, every quiet second, my thoughts drifted back to that photo, to the realization that Sarah had moved on and was starting a new life. It was a wound that refused to heal, a constant ache in my chest. I avoided social media, not wanting to see any more reminders of Sarah's new life. But the damage had already been done. The image of her happy and pregnant was seared into my mind, a painful reminder of what I had lost. It was as if everything I had gone through, all the pain and betrayal, had been for nothing. She had moved on, and I was still stuck in the past. But as I sat there, I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't let Sarah's actions define the rest of my life. I had to find a way to move forward, to find some semblance of peace, for Lily's sake, if not for my own. 1 year later, life had changed dramatically for all of us. Sarah's once radiant smile was nowhere to be seen, and the perfect life she had envisioned had crumbled. Her new husband, Michael, had left her shortly after the birth of their child. The baby wasn't his, and the revelation had shattered whatever trust and love they had built. Sarah had tried to hold it together, but the stress and reality of being a single mother to two young children took its toll. She moved back in with her parents, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her every day. She had thought she found solace in a fresh start, but instead she found herself alone and struggling.